Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Three Survivors, Three Perspectives, 3Gs Ask All. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Lindsay Kamens, 3GNY board member and grandchild of two Holocaust refugees. I'm thrilled to be here tonight for a meaningful conversation with Hedy Bohm, Ralph Rehbock, and Max Eisen. We welcome all of you tuning in for the first time, as well as those of you who regularly participate in our programs. We are grateful for our community. Tonight, as mentioned, we will be joined by Hedy Bohm, Ralph Rehbock, and Max Eisen. Hedy, Ralph, and Max have each shared their stories to educate countless others about the Holocaust and the dangers of intolerance. This evening, we have the unique opportunity to learn and listen to Hedy, Ralph, and Max on an up-close and personal level. We thank our 3G community who submitted questions and look forward to tonight's conversation. For those who don't know, 3GNY is an educational nonprofit for grandchildren of survivors and supporters. As a living link, we preserve the legacies and lessons of the Holocaust. Our mission is to educate diverse communities about the perils of intolerance and to provide a supportive forum for the descendants of survivors. Founded in 2005 with a group of 6, 3GNY's membership is now above 5,000 and continues to grow. Over these past 16 years, we've held diverse programs of all sizes around the New York area. In addition, we've played a leading role in launching other 3G groups around the nation. Recently, we announced that 3G Philly and 3GNJ have joined us as official regional affiliates under our nonprofit status. Our educational initiative, We Do, has trained over 300 grandchildren to learn and compellingly share their families' Holocaust experiences in school classrooms and with community groups. In 2020 alone, we trained 62 grandchildren, more speakers than any other year. In total, we've been to more than 500 classrooms and have impacted more than 31,000 students. And between our live programming and YouTube channel, more than 15,000 additional people have heard our stories. Hope is not lost, and we need to keep doing the work, now more than ever. You can help us accomplish this through a financial gift of any amount. This will go directly toward training more speakers, thus reaching even more students. We do not solicit donations from schools, teachers, or students. We provide our programming to schools completely free, and we aim to keep the cost of training to 3Gs as low as possible. There is a link with ways to donate in the chat, and we hope you will consider making a gift. If you've already donated to us, thank you so much. And to everyone, by just being here tonight, you're helping us honor the memories of our grandparents and ensuring that never again is more than just an empty phrase. It is now my pleasure to introduce you to Hedy Bohm.
Sorry.
Oh, no worries. Hedy Bohm, Ralph Rehbock, Max Eisen, as well as David Wax, president of 3GNY, who will be moderating this evening's conversation with me.
Hello, everybody. And Ralph, Hedy, and Max, can you unmute yourselves? Apparently I can't. But thank you, everybody, for joining us. I guess I'll start with just saying that the concept of this event was to essentially ask survivors questions that they might not normally be asked. So we're kind of trying to just go right into the questions, and that's why we had the slide up about their backgrounds, but hopefully we can just go into it. But also we want you to participate in real time. So if you have a question about something or comment about something we're talking about, please type it in to the Q&A immediately, and I will try and follow up with Lindsay as best as we can to get it into the conversation. So first off, we're going to start with the question, and I'm going to ask Ralph this question. For those who don't know, if you looked at the slide, Ralph was able to get out of Germany fairly early, in terms of the war. But the question is, what defines a Holocaust survivor? Many times we have heard from people where they were taught, even from their parents who were children of survivors, that a survivor is really someone, who was only in a camp. Even my own cousin had said this to me. Oh, my mother isn't a survivor. She wasn't in a German camp. So Ralph, what do you think about this one?
Well, I've been involved with this conversation for a long, long time. We German Jews that were able to get out of Germany after 1933 and before 1939, and specifically just before or just after Kristallnacht, which was in 1938, as in our case. But it's been defined by historians and by museums and the German government, that a survivor, a Holocaust survivor, is considered to be anyone who was under German occupation between the years of 1933 to 1945, totally independent of the question of ghettos and camps. And that is the official definition that has been created in maybe later years than the years that some of us arrived in America.
Hedy, do you think that matters? Do you think like any definition really matters if someone was affected by it, whether it was German, Russian, or any other local Polish person?
To me, that's not an important issue. I haven't argued about it, and I'm not going to. There are much more important issues that we can concentrate on, and if that is the official definition, as far as Ralph is concerned, I had no quarrel with it.
And Max, do you have anything to say on this?
I think that Ralph described it. It's correct. Wherever Jews lived in Europe or in the East, every single Jew was affected by the Nazis as they rolled on over Europe, over continental Europe. So I will accept it, as Ralph said, wherever the Nazis came, our life turned into a nightmare. So every single Jew has a right to call himself, if he so wishes, whatever. That's my definition. And as Hedy said, there are many more important things to talk about rather than hashing over this history. Okay.
Lindsay, you want to take the next one?
Sure. So, Ralph, how has your life been shaped by what you went through and experienced?
Very much so, in the sense that as a young child leaving Germany at age 4, I was certainly well taken care of and spent happy days from 1934 to 1938 as a very protected child. But after arriving in America and being sponsored by an American family and becoming part of that family, we certainly were very knowledgeable about our past and talked about our past, maybe not right at the beginning, but certainly I've spent most of my adult life speaking about the experiences of our family and other families that were even after 1918, how the life in Germany changed all the way to the rise of Hitler, the rise of Nazism, and how our lives were personally affected all the way through Kristallnacht, which we can talk about later, and then be able to escape after Kristallnacht.
Okay, thank you. Hedy, how about you? How would you say your life has been shaped by what you went through and experienced?
We don't have time for that, honey. My life has been totally turned upside down as I just became 16 2 weeks or 3 weeks before I arrived at Auschwitz, where my parents were murdered, when I found myself alone. And it certainly changed, even though I tried to bury the memories and succeeded most of the time for over half a century. It definitely affected my choices in life, the way I felt, the way I reached out for love and security, definitely.
And Max, how about you?
Well, I was born in Czechoslovakia, which was a democratic country, and the country was put on a platter to Hitler by the British and the French prime ministers. And our life in Czechoslovakia became a nightmare. The country was divided into 3 parts, and we were given to Hungary. I had a huge loving family. In 1939, Hungarians marched into my part of the world, and they brought with them the racial laws against the Jewish people. I wound up in Auschwitz in 1944. You see, one thing you need to, all of you need to remember, what happened in Europe, it started with words, with hatred against Jews, anti-Semitism. These are all words that should be very relative to what's happening today. So it starts with words and it ends in horrible places. I was 15 when I arrived in Auschwitz in 1944. And we in Hungary did not know what was happening in the killing places in occupied Poland. What were the Jews thinking? We need to be thinking, looking forward. In 1944, 450,000 Hungarian Jews were gassed in Auschwitz, including my entire family. You know, you're liberated in 1945 by the Americans. The world was celebrating the end of the war. There was no celebration for the Jews in Europe. Our community was totally destroyed. I was looking for somebody. I didn't find anybody. Do you know what it feels like to be 15 and a half, coming back from a camp to your town where a neighbor is sitting in your home? And then try to find a roof over your head. And you know, how do you pick up the pieces? How do you start? I was fortunate eventually. I lived in Czechoslovakia for 3 years after the war. It was a democratic country again. I arrived in Canada in 1949. And I lived in Canada ever since. And I've been a speaker for 32 years in this country. Hedy and my colleagues and friends, we've been speakers for years and years and years. And we wind up today to see, and I wonder, all the speaking that we did, where did it take us today? With all this hatred around. So I'm very fortunate. I have a lovely wife. I have 2 sons, 2 granddaughters, and 3 great-grandchildren. And I worry about them, what their future is going to be like down the road. So this is what I'm thinking as a survivor. And we all need to be thinking of what goes around. We must not be bystanders. We Jews must not be bystanders. This is my story.
This came up from the audience actually, and you touched upon it. Someone was saying, you know, the question was, do you feel it's happening again? And I know that you mentioned it started with words, and there's the Claims Conference, campaign. It started with words that you were in recently, and Ralph is actually in that campaign soon, coming up. But yeah, I guess Ralph, let's hear from you. Do you think that there are similar feelings in today's world? Do you have the same feelings of what happened back then now? Do you think it's similar?
Now, the anti-Semitism that we are experiencing all over the world, the rise of anti-Semitism again, outwardly, whereas for quite a few years in America and other places, it was hidden. People weren't able to attend certain clubs, or they weren't able to go to certain hotels or certain resorts because they were seemingly Jewish. The name may have been Jewish or something like that. That kind of behind the back anti-Semitism. But now it's right out there in social media every single day. And so I and my fellow members of the Illinois Holocaust Museum, survivors in our Speakers Bureau, make sure that we talk about the revision, the rising of anti-Semitism, to say nothing of our personal stories. Our personal stories all had something to do with something that was said to us or something that was acted upon us while we were growing up or while our parents were growing up. The idea that after 1933, when Hitler came to power, and in 1935, with the Nuremberg laws, all of our citizenship was taken away. All of our, like the Jim Crow laws in the American South, we could not sit on a park bench as Jews. We could not swim in a public swimming pool as Jews. We could not, my mother was a dental hygienist. She was fired from her job as a dental hygienist because she worked for a non-Jewish dentist. The Jews could no longer work for non-Jews. So many things were done as part of the Nuremberg laws that were made people suffer along the way. It wasn't outward because there was no shooting, there was no killing going on, but the activity of the Nazi Party to the Jews of Germany, we represented only 1% of the population. There were 500,000 Jews in Germany. There were 65 million people in Germany after World War I. And through the inflation and through the depression which followed, and then the Nazi Party that got the plurality of the vote with only 33% of the vote, they took over the government. And then those things started happening that we just talked about before. And only when it became Kristallnacht, the German government was hoping that they would realize that the world would not react in any way, shape, or form to that horrible event on the night of November the 9th, 1938. The fact that 30,000 Jewish men between 16 and 60 were arrested. The fact that 91 people were killed. One of them was my uncle. The fact that 1,400 synagogues were burned. The fact that thousands of Jewish-owned shops were smashed. The windows were smashed, and that's why it's called Kristallnacht, the night of the broken glass. And then the whole idea of being, Max just talked before about bystander. We at the museum have coined an expression which we take from as an opposite of bystander, and we are teaching that everyone that listens to our stories should become an upstander to do the right things at all times, because the stories we tell talk about those people that were bystanders, those people that did not help us, those people that were not concerned about the fact that we were so downtrodden, even in Germany before the war began in 1939.
Thank you, Ralph. We actually just got a question that came in, and Hedy, I'm going to ask you this. So the question is, the question is, what is your perspective of survivors who will not speak out about their experiences? This person said her father has not wanted to share what has happened, and being that
I hear that very often, Lindsay, when I speak to people, to schools, and I'm not surprised at it. It's quite common. And as I told you, I was one of those, other than very short answers to my children's questions as they were growing up, even before 10 or early teens. My husband and I were very careful about our answers, to tell the truth, but not more than they could comprehend, nothing to give them nightmares. So it was easier not to say something than to decide that you do have to say even a little bit, just to let them know where they're coming from, what was happening to the parents in their life in the early years, not that much older than they were. And like Max and Ralph already said, all of us, beyond telling our stories, I don't consider my story any more important to tell. You can Google it or YouTube it, and you can find the details. We have so many stories, thousands and thousands of people who tell their stories, their sufferings in Auschwitz, in Mauthausen, in Bergen-Belsen, in all those special places they built for us. I wonder, as Max said, all the talking, all the telling, what have we accomplished all these years? Did we make a mark? I know I, and probably everyone else, concentrates on building up the self-esteem of the students we talk to make them believe that they have something unique, every one of them, to contribute, that nobody is insignificant, that you can't say, I can't. You have to, you must be braver than you ever thought you could be. But you must act, you must prepare, you must learn history, you must learn how to confront people who attack you on campus or at schools with slogans and signs. You must educate yourself and must prepare yourself. And not in half a joke, maybe 3/4 of a joke. I always include that I wish everyone would learn martial arts to know how to defend themselves. Not that it would have made much difference in my life, definitely not in Auschwitz or in Germany, but today the anti-Semitism is different. You are confronted on a street at your school, and prepare yourself so you can face it, and that where you have a chance, both mentally prepared and physically.
Right on.
So I'm going to change the topic a little bit here. There was a documentary that came out earlier this year that I saw called "You Had to Be There." It was about humor during the Holocaust. where they interviewed different survivors and talking about different events and what was funny to them during their times when they were at camps or on cattle cars. How do you feel about this? Do you have any memory where like you felt like a little giggle or just even a smile on your face during this time? I'll ask you first, Max. Do you have any memory of this?
You know, it's funny that you asked this. I used to speak at summer camps, and I remember it was maybe 600 campers, and I told my story, and questions came up, and maybe a 6-year-old little person says to me, "Mr. Eisen, what kind of activities did you have in camp?" You know, and I go to camps with teenagers. They're all, these are very expensive camps. They have sailboats, canoes, trekking, you name it. And what Hedy said, I said to the owner, I said, "You know something?" And I said to the campers, I said, "You're 16, 17. You're having a wonderful time. And I'm happy that you have a wonderful time. You know that your brothers, so-called in Israel, they're already in the army. And so here they'll be finishing grade 12, go to university for 4 years, and then go to Nepal for a year. And 24, when they come back in Israel, these young boys that already been on the battlefront. I've been saying, I told to the owner, I says, "You know something? You should teach these kids Israeli Krav Maga. You know what it feels like to be in a school where everybody's on your head? Every morning you arrive in school and there's a battle. You're made to sit in the back row of the classroom. Never do I want to see a Jew cower in the back row of a classroom. You know? And I've seen kids who are doing martial arts. The confidence, the strength that they have, it is beyond belief. And you know, this is what it's going to come down to. If we are weak in the knees, we're not going to make it. This is the kind of world we are living in. So we know who have gone through this. It's hard for people to believe. Find a camp? Are you kidding? Do you know what camp life was? Can you imagine Birkenau, Auschwitz with about, I don't know, tens of thousands of women? 10,000 women having one toilet, one barrack, having a shirt, a rag in the winter. What fun do they have? Can you imagine a Jewish doctor in Birkenau, Gisela Pearl, who was a gynecologist? He had to abort the babies of young married women to save the mothers' lives, because had they found out that they were pregnant, they would have been put into the gas. This was life. This was not a camp. It's a misnomer. Can you imagine watching 4 young women being hanged in Auschwitz? I've seen that. I was 15 and a half years old because they stole some powder, you know, explosive from a factory to blow up one of the gas chambers. This was life. You were dancing on the edge of a razor blade, living on 300 calories a day. Can you believe that? Was that fun? You have no underwear, you have no socks, you're torn out from a home, and you're dumped into a terrible place with people who have been there already a year. You cannot describe this, you know, what life was there. So I don't see anybody who had fun there. By the way, I've published my memoirs, and I think what you need to know, every single child and person needs to read this book. And my book is published by HarperCollins, Harlequin Square Press in the States, in Europe, This is what everybody should know what a camp life was. So to say that some people had fun, I find it hard to believe. You were living from second to second. You put one foot in front of the other. Nobody knows what it's like to be moved from Auschwitz in 1945, January the 12th, in a bitter cold, for 13 days exposed to the elements, winding up in Mauthausen, Austria, without a crumb of food. Do you know what it means like? You were living on some snowflakes that were coming down from the sky. So this was life in the camps.
Hedy, would you agree to that sentiment? Did you find any, I wasn't saying it was fun, but did you find any humor at any point in time where you can think about something that could be funny to you in your head or something like that that you have a memory of?
Are you asking me?
No, Hedy.
Oh, you're asking me. Oh,
I was
I'm
asking you.
sorry. I thought Max was still speaking. No, I don't think so, other
Okay.
than making our own fun in Germany when I was working in a factory, an ammunition factory in Fallersleben. And during the air raids, we were ordered forcibly to leave our beds and go into the bunkers in the basement. And we spent there many, many hours, 3-4 times a week, if not every day. And there, the group of us, we were quite a lot. And there were several bunkers. And the ones we had, our group, I remember, deciding to entertain each other. And those who had a voice sang a little. Those who liked poetry and knew some poems by heart, recited the poetry or stories or little skits to entertain each other, to make the time pass. But jokes as such, unless you remembered some, and at this point when we were, as I say, trying to make the hours of waiting in the bunker easier on each other, other than that, not really. Not really.
Makes sense.
I don't remember anything that was funny. It was unreal for me, actually, Auschwitz, totally unreal. I don't think I know I didn't understand where I was. I was too naive, too uninformed, had no idea what was going on. And my only thing in my head, my vision was just to stay clean, stay healthy, survive. So when this is over, you can be again with your mother. That was all I could think of. And that's all that pulled and pushed me. And frankly, I was in hell without realizing where I was. And probably that's a big, big part of the reason that I'm here now to tell the story. Because there was that hope and the will to do whatever was in my power, to stay clean, to wash daily. I mean, we only had one dress, no underwear, and we slept on the ground, the bare ground, same as outdoors. So how do you keep yourself clean? I washed from head to foot every morning in cold water before our roll calls. I thought that was important to stay healthy. And I ate all the horrible soup they gave me that some people couldn't, because I knew that's it. So whatever little nourishment it has, I must take as much as I was given to survive. I mean, other than that, we had this little piece of bread with a tiny bit of jam or margarine. for daily, as Max said, maybe 300 calories. I had no one to give me anything, no one that I knew to put me in a position where I was better off than everyone else. But I had this hope in me of having to survive and must do everything I can think of to stay well, and in order that I should be reunited with my mom at the end. I had no other future, no other thoughts in my mind. This was uppermost. And those who gave up on hope, who didn't have this imagined possibility that I gave myself of being reunited with your mom, my friends, my classmates, perhaps who knew reality that was Auschwitz-Birkenau, they didn't come back. One thing I learned: without hope and without doing something yourself about it, you cannot survive. There is no life if you don't have that. And we now must realize that we are in dire situation. It's happening openly all over the world. And if we don't prepare for it, then we fall into the same mistake that my generation did. And I hope, I wish and pray that this new generation I speak to is smarter and more ready to listen and believe, and then to put something in effect, to do, because whatever you call it, if you don't do it, if you don't find the courage in yourself to do it, you can't expect the next person to do it for you. I'm sorry, I strayed off the question.
That's okay. Thank you. Ralph, how would you say your experience as a survivor affected your parenting of your children and even with your grandchildren today?
And I also have 3 great-grandchildren.
Oh,
So we, they all understand, not the 6 and the 4 and the 2-year-old yet, but the others very much understand from whence I came. They knew my parents, my children did, and my grandchildren did. And they knew their stories, because we certainly have told those stories for all these years. My mother was interviewed at the Holocaust Museum in 1986. Now, that's a long time after our arrival in 1938, because like Hedy said, most survivors did not tell their stories because they were concerned about how it would affect the children. But when my sons were in high school, they started asking questions of their grandmother. And when I had my mother interviewed in great detail for several hours and told all the experiences that she and the family had all the way from 1918 to 1938, detailed almost day by day as to how we suffered and what was experienced by us living under the Nazi regime. But the important thing is that Hedy and Max, you have definitely made an impression. You are both concerned as to whether you've made an impression with all the thousands of children you have spoken to. I have also spoken to thousands of children, and all I know is the letters that we get and the comments from the teachers. When we speak to them, something does get through, whether they ask questions or not. there is a response inside of them. We are now engaged in the opportunity of not just Holocaust survivor grandchildren, but we are making sure that as we speak, we also tell all of these children, most of whom are not Jewish and not have any idea of the Holocaust until they came to our museum. But when we speak to them, and now we are saying, please go home and ask your grandparents their stories. Put it in your phone. I go to all too many funerals where people say, if we had only asked Grandma the questions about her life, we would be able to pass it on to our children when we have them. Children don't think that way, so we are encouraging them to make sure while they are still living, get their stories. In 1978, when the Nazis wanted to march in Skokie, Illinois, that's the moment that all hell broke loose for the survivors. The survivors in the Chicago area started spilling out their stories because they knew that it had to be told. They knew that people had to know what happened. They had been holding back, but once they saw those Nazis on the streets in Skokie, Illinois, they knew they had to say something. And that's still what the three of us are doing. We are talking about our stories and the stories of people that we survived with, and to make sure that the children that hear these stories become upstanders, that do the right things, that they go home and they tell the stories, hopefully, that a little bit of snippets of what we have told to them while we were in front of them for 30 minutes or an hour, whatever it happens to be. And that's what I'm hoping for, and that's what I've been doing my entire life after the age of 30 or so, to tell the story, to tell my parents' story, my story, our story, and the fact that there were 5 individuals that saved us. Just because we happened to be in Germany and happened to be able to make contact with an American cousin family, they did the affidavit of support. Unfortunately, those of you who lived in the East did not have those opportunities. And I'm saying not that we're very proud of that, but the fact is that the calendar worked in our favor. The fact that we were in Germany at the time and we could contact people and they did the affidavits of support, and that's how we got out. But there was a Marine Guard, there was an ambassador, there was a stranger at a train station, all that helped us survive getting out of Germany and into Holland, which was still a free country, and then go across to England and then to the USA. All these people, including a young teenage girl who, when she was confronted by my father, it was a young teenage Jewish girl who was house sitting for us when we were in Berlin to get our visas. That was on the 9th of November, Kristallnacht. The young girl was confronted with the Gestapo, and they asked this girl, where is Herr Rehbock, my father? He was between the ages of 16 and 60, and therefore he was going to be arrested. All they wanted to know is where my father was. And she did not give him up, but she also did not lie in a way that could be detected as a lie. All she did was said to the Gestapo, I don't know. And they left in disgust. And she immediately called my father in the hotel room in Berlin, where we were waiting for going to the embassy the next day. Told my father, the English lesson has been canceled, because we knew that every single phone in Germany was tapped. You could not speak the truth into the phone or you would be picked up. So the young girl who also did not give us away also said, the English lesson has been canceled, of course, speaking in German, and my father realized that he should never come home again because that coded message was one that he had given to her in preparation for our leaving town in order to get to Berlin 6 hours away by train and go to the embassy as we were supposed to do on the 10th of November. Of all the dates that the American government picked for us to go to the embassy, it was the 10th of November, the night of the 9th, Kristallnacht, the night before. And that's when we did go there, and we were saved, had been saved by these 5 individuals independently of each other that made it possible for us to get out.
So thank you, Ralph. This one came from the audience, but is one of ours as well. But it is a constant theme that actually people seem to want to ask, which is, do you feel guilt? Hedy, do you feel guilt?
No,
And that could be from surviving when someone else didn't. That could be something
No.
from something else. No.
no, that's not one of the things that stayed with me. I don't feel any guilt whatsoever. I don't see why I should, other than not having been informed enough to know what was going on. But that was out of my hands too. I was a schoolgirl going to an Orthodox Jewish girls' school with a very strict regime, concentrating on sciences and math and nothing whatsoever about real life. We had not been even encouraged to think for ourselves. In those days, I'm talking about the 40s, we were encouraged to learn by rote. You memorized. We were not asked our opinion or what we think. You could be a little bit creative when you did your essays in literature, but that was the only time. At home, I was not informed about anything my parents thought that it was important. I was handled as a young girl who should be spared worrying and anxiety, and I was. I grew up totally as a child, even when I was in my teens. I absolutely had no idea what was going on in the world. We were, in that respect, as Ralph said, fortunate because it didn't start. Even when the Hungarians took over the part of the country of Romania, where my city was, we still kept on living our simple, modest life the way we did 39, 40, 41, 42, until they started taking away the man. And then in 44 came all of a sudden, within a month, school closed, a month in a ghetto, 1 month, not years like the Polish people or in Slovakia happened. So from within 3 months, those 500,000 Jews were shipped out by the wonderful, eager help of the Hungarian army, gendarmes, and Nazi police that took over. I hardly ever saw a German Nazi. It was all Hungarians who organized the ghetto, who organized emptying the ghetto within 1 month and shipping us 30,000 in my city. Out of 100,000 population, a third were Jewish. And it took only a month to get rid of us, to push us all on cattle cars. and feed us lies, lies and lies about you're going to be put down, you're going to be allowed to stay at the border. You're going to be working there during the war. I remember hearing those stories. I'm sure my parents and other parents knew better, but it was never shared with me. The possibility of what would happen or that I could be without my parents never occurred to me. We were brought up so naive that at 16, I don't think I was as sophisticated as a 6-year-old is today, with all the available phones and computers and iPads and the world, the news of the world at your fingertips. Our radios were taken away, so we couldn't listen to English broadcasting. But it happened so fast. But guilt, I don't know. That I've been spared. A lot of other things, yes, emotionally, but guilt, no.
Max, what's your feeling on this? Do you feel similar?
I don't feel guilt. I was in Auschwitz for 2 months with my father and uncle. They sort of gave me a help to get into a camp life, as they say. And my father and uncle were selected out 2 months later in July for medical experiments. I only had seconds to say goodbye to my father and uncle. The barbed wire fence in Auschwitz I. My father told me, he gave me a blessing, and he told me that if I managed to survive, I must tell the world what happened here. And I carry his message. I just want to mention how this world is different and yet the same as it was before, and maybe worse. A few months ago, you probably all heard the name of Lord Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, the late Chief Rabbi of Great Britain. He said, anti-Semitism mutates, lives on by mutating. In the Middle Ages, they hated us Jews because of our religion. In the 19th and 20th century, they hate us because of our race. Today, they hate us because of our nation state, tiny little country of Israel. We Jews are now hated by simply every single country in this world. Israel has been picked on, and this is the label that we have, and we have to deal with this. So just think, God forbid, in those days, I said, oh my gosh, you know, if I can only get to America, everything will be fine. You know, or where do you want to go today? You know, in Europe, think about it. That world was called the old cultured world of Europe. The old cultured world of Europe in 2 wars. There were 100 million people killed in this cultured world of Europe. There is maybe what, less than 1 million Jews in continental Europe today? Anti-Semitism and the hatred of Jews. So this is the world we live in. And we need to be prepared for any eventuality, you know, and we need to be strong, as Hedy said. And, you know, children are much more smarter, you think, today, but in many ways, they're not smarter. They know all these gadgets and buttons, but we knew life as it was. My grandfather, who was a man of the land, he gave me tools to work with that I could survive a year in the camp. Works ethics and skills that my father, my grandfather, my mother, my father, we knew these things, how to survive. Can our children survive? This is what we need to think about. I tell mothers, I said, look, why don't you do this? Why don't you send your son to take Krav Maga? She says, Max, they're so spoiled. This is what I hear from parents. So please, in Hungary, the disaster came. Did you know that Hungary had the most influential Jewish community in Europe? They've been there for over 1,000 years. Jews were there when the Roman Empire was there. In Budapest, they had all kinds of agencies, wealthy Jews, all the agencies. They sat until the last and did absolutely nothing. Are we going to do the same thing? Have we not learned from the past? We are teaching children and everybody, learn from the past. Are we doing the same thing? So I just wanted you to leave you with that.
Yes.
We need smart people like Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. We somehow don't want to see the truth. We go on living our life, but there's a lot of bad things, poison that is floating around all around us today. Read my book.
Thank you.
Ralph, you trying to answer this one too about the guilt?
Yes, I am. I am.
Let's try.
With a more positive note, that when my uncle was in his 80s, after he had written our ability to get out, when he was in his 80s, he looked at me one day over lunch and he said, Ralph, I have been feeling guilty all of these years because I signed for your family, but I did not know what was going on, or certainly not have any feeling for what was going to go on. Remember, he did this in 1938 when he was in his 30s. So 50 years, he felt guilty that he did not sign for thousands rather than signing for one family. That's a positive twist on guilt. My only guilt is that not more ability to speak to more and more and more people, adults, children, whatever, to tell these stories. Hedy's story, Max's story, my different kind of story, but a story that's positive nevertheless, because these people that helped save us, 5 different people that helped save us, because they were able to, and they did. And the uncle that felt guilty for not having saved more. The Jews of Germany spent all of these years under Hitler, and they all thought that Hitler would go away, that the Nazi Party would disappear, that they just sat still and did nothing, and maybe they have some guilt of not having done anything before, or about the fact that they thought that Hitler would go away. And fortunately, my parents did not think that Hitler would go away, and that's why they contacted the American family. The other part of humor is that when our President Emeritus was in high school, and he had come from camp life in Poland, and as a young child, and they were sitting around luncheon in high school, and they were talking about their their private Jewish summer camp experiences. And they said, Sam, what camp did you go to? And he said, concentration camp. Almost the same story that Max was telling about his campers. There was an element of humor there, but he never talked about his background, never even was confronted why he had a Polish kind of a Jewish accent all through the high school years. He never said a word, but he spent the rest of his life telling his story and including that story about the concentration camp as compared to the summer summer camp. I'm guilty only of not having been able to speak to even more, and why I am very much involved with the museum and training 3Gs. My granddaughter, Carly, is learning my story. She is going to be able to tell it when I am no longer able to do so. And I hope that the other 3Gs that are listening can feel that they are doing a very, very, very worthwhile experience with the 3G program, wherever they may be. They are not survivors, and they are not, their parents might not have been survivors, but their grandparents might have been or were, and they can carry this in words. Words matter. Yes, but these positive words also matter. Tell the stories. Keep the stories alive.
Ralph,
On that note, yeah,
go on,
sorry.
Lindsay.
On that note, we actually did receive a question, and I'll go to Hedy, and I'd love to hear Ralph and Max your answers as well if we have time. But do you have any advice for third generation classroom speakers who are sharing their grandparents' stories, given it is still impactful, but it's being told by the third person? So Hedy, what are your
About
words?
the third generation going.
Yes.
I think that's the most wonderful thing that can happen to us oldsters, to know that our children, second, third, or even fourth, who knows the future, will remember our stories, that they bothered to listen, bothered to remember. They thought it was important enough. Because I've heard also some third generation tell me that I can't go to Auschwitz with the March of the Living. That would be too hard for me emotionally. Too hard emotionally to look at what we went through and lived. But this is, unfortunately, very true to quite a few of the young people. As we already mentioned, they grew up, most of them, so used to having everything they want, never mind what they need, what they want. They don't even know, I think, the difference anymore. With us, it was a different story. In my life, we had very little once because we knew better. We knew that there was a limit to what we could get. And I remember understanding, even as a child, that I shouldn't ask for an expensive toy because that would have been beyond my parents' ability to give. But I don't think there is anything some of the young generation think that they don't deserve, that they shouldn't get, they shouldn't have. And I don't know what to say to them, how to influence those, our own Jewish grandchildren's age, young people. And I must say, like I think Max or Ralph said also, 90% of the time I speak to non-Jewish people, a lot of Catholics, and I found that those children were better prepared with our history than our own children were, and sometimes more eager to learn and more interested. I'm hoping that this is an exception to the rule. I'm always trying to be positive, but sometimes it's difficult. You must see something. And how do you answer this, being told that it would be too difficult for me to go to Auschwitz? I understand and I don't understand. And the part that doesn't understand grieves for the lack that there is in those children of wanting it to know, wanting knowing bad enough to face reality and to face what we did have to face.
Thank you. Max, do you have any advice for third generation classroom speakers?
I think I just want to say that some people said that looking at our own two sons, we have twins, now 68 years old. It's a third generation in many survivor families that the children start to ask questions. And in our case, it was our granddaughters. It's interesting. So I know some people in Toronto who are children of survivors who were my colleagues, who have passed on. You know, we are at a stage when our friends are leaving us, and so it is such an important thing. I look at our Jewish people that we must be as strong as the strongest chain. We cannot afford to lose one little link in this chain. If we lose this link, we lose our history. You know, this is the way I look at it. And this is why it's so important. You know, little snippets just to show you. I was at a big event and I was standing at a table where my book was being sold by a bookstore. So one of our people who were invited to this dinner, he said, "Oh, another Holocaust story, you know, another Holocaust story." So some people are thinking this way, but these children, second generation, and I seem to notice that a lot of them are young women. You know, where are the boys? And this is a sad thing. If we lose our history, we lose, we are done. You know, there's no chain that will bind us together again. So this is why it's so important. And it's an amazing job. It's a thankless job, probably. And I have to say that what Hedy said, when I go to Catholic schools, the respect and the preparation is absolutely amazing. You know, there's a big Jewish school, high school, last year, no, 2 years ago, or my God, it must be 3 years ago now, in 2019. I had a phone call to come and speak to them. I said, my God, where were you for 30 years? I haven't heard from you, you know, for 30 years. For 30 years? I said, sure. I want you to come and speak to your 11 and 12-year-olds. How much time do I have? I said, you have 35 minutes. I said, thank you, I'm not coming. I cannot teach this subject in 35 minutes. So just to say this, the survivor, I said, well, how much time do you need? I need an hour and a half. He said, well, I don't know whether the teachers want to give up time from their classes. I said, well, if they can't give up their time, forget it, you know, and let me know what you're. So I was there for an hour and a half just to give you an idea of how these people are thinking, you know. This is a subject. When we go to a Catholic school, they handle us with kid gloves. And that's beside the story. But not everybody is this. Everybody is different, but it's just ingrained that they respect you and they listen to your story, and that's important to me. So call hakavot to these second generation, and there are many third generation that are getting involved now. So this is important. We need this involvement from our young people to keep us together, to keep us safe. We need every single one of us there on the line.
So I'm going to ask one more question. I'll try to see if you can keep it short, but it's one you could it's one you could each write a book on, I'm sure. Ralph, I'll start with you. What is your greatest achievement? Tough one, huh?
No, it's not tough at all. It's just a matter of putting it into just a few words, and I will. And that is, my greatest achievement is having met my ultimately wife-to-be of 65 years, our first day of high school in the first class, sitting one seat away, and that's what developed the relationship that became our life together. And then our two sons who are in their 60s, our 6, 7, 8 grandchildren with wives and husbands who are all in their 30s, and the little ones now. That I feel is the greatest achievement, because if we would not have left Germany in December of 1938, those people would not have been, at least in my life. And so that being an achievement. The next down the line or up the line is my experience as a Reformed Jew, very active in congregations over the years, and teaching them and learning, and a 76-year experience in scouting to date, and working with handicap scouts, and the museum, the Illinois Holocaust Museum, started in 1981 by the survivors that wanted to start telling their stories. And my joining that group in the 1980s and being so involved to this date and on the board, et cetera. But the important thing is the stories that we are telling, the stories that our younger, our the 2Gs and 3Gs, and then we do have a group of 2Gs that are out telling the stories of their parents who are no longer living, and are now our 3Gs. That's I feel a commitment that I've made to the museum, that our Heritage Committee that I chair is going to be responsible for this continuance of the stories that have been previously stated and those that have not been told before.
Hedy, what is your greatest achievement?
My children, no doubt. I pet my shoulders and also say thank you for having those two wonderful, caring, loving children. And I mean, caring for the world, never mind just for me, which they do, but caring for other human beings, friends, colleagues, acquaintances even. And
All right.
other great achievement is perhaps if I can install in the students and young people I talk to switch somehow hate to caring, to kindness, and to confront if they are confronted with hate, not to respond with hate. but to be kind. And never mind what religion you are, if you will treat your neighbor as you would be treated as yourself, and do unto others as you would have done to you, I think we would have a different world, and that's what I'm praying for. Maybe scientists will discover how to switch the DNA of hate to kindness.
Max.
Well, I have a lot to thank a lot of people. Imagine a refugee arriving in Canada with a paper suitcase with less than $1 in his pocket in 1949. I met my girlfriend. I was sent to a job, and eventually we got married. So my wife has been a great help. She's my wife, she's my advisor, she's my backbone. And we have two amazing twins. And, you know, I'm sort of hitting a bit of a rough time now, health-wise. Two sons are my support group. And we also have two granddaughters. And we have three great-grandchildren, and they are truly my biggest joy. And they live in Jerusalem. And I can play chess with them on Zoom. And there's nothing that can top that, you know, and I wish I could see them more often. So I have a lot to be thankful for. And, you know, there were some individuals that pulled me through in the tough times in the camps, and those were remarkable people. And one was a Polish surgeon in Auschwitz, of a stretcher that was taking me to the gas chamber. And he gave me a job in the surgery department, and I became the cleaner, and I did that for 6 months in Auschwitz. One saved my life. So these are things that I'm thankful for. And I think that's absolutely amazing. I met some amazing people, and these are my memories. And I would say that if we can learn, like Hedy said, there's another word as well, respect each other, you know, not tolerate each other. That's a meaningless word. I think respect each other, that is a very important word. We need to teach this word to our kids from kindergarten on. Respect, respect, respect.
Thank you. Thank you, Max. And thank you, Ralph and Hedy. And thank you to all for joining us this evening. We are so glad and appreciative you took the time to hear from Hedy, Ralph, and Max. And we truly thank them for gifting us with their stories and lessons learned. If you haven't yet made a gift to support our educational programs, we hope you'll consider making one now. Please refer to the chat for ways you can donate. Thank you. Now, here are a few upcoming events and announcements. On Wednesday, September 1st, please join us for our next We Do Wednesday with 3G member Rebecca Weintraub. On September 30th, 3G Philly and 3G NJ will be hosting a short reading and Q&A with author and podcaster Rachel Cerati. Additionally, with the start of the school year upon us, we are always looking for connections with educators who may want our speakers to present to their classes. So please do let us know and reach out if you have any. We have a large speakers bureau of grandchildren prepared and ready to present. We will send out an email tomorrow with additional details on all of this, as well as a recording of tonight's program. You can also check out our past events on 3GNY's YouTube channel. Thank you again for taking the time out of your evening to be with us. We are grateful as always for your presence and support.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, thank you.
Good night.
Our watchword of our motto at the museum is remember the past, transform the future. And that's what we're all about.
That's a good one. All right. Have a great night. Bye.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Thank you, Lindsay, for arranging
Thank you.
Thank you.
it. Bye-bye.
Thank you to 3GNY.